Hi guys, Christos here, Cyprus Without Borders. So last night somebody sent me a link to a video on YouTube. The video was published 5 days ago and it's a video of a webinar. A webinar is basically an online seminar. It's 4 or 5 politicians of past and present having a discussion. And what they were discussing was recognition of the pseudo-state in Cyprus. I haven't watched it all yet. It's an hour and a half long. But when I watched the first person who speaks, I felt nauseous and I really found it difficult to sleep last night, actually. It was really quite disgusting. The things that he says, he's basically reading off a Turkish script. His name is Michael Stephen. He used to be a Conservative MP. He's no longer an MP, but he is still affiliated with the Conservative Party. So what this man is saying, Michael Stephen, is, we're going to watch what he's in a minute. We're going to watch what he says in a little while. We're going to watch it together. But last night I was worried, but today I've gone through it all and I've checked him out. I've researched it, and I don't think he is anything to worry about. I think he's just an aging old man who hasn't really had a particularly impressive career in politics. And he's made his way in politics through the Cyprus issue. And he served as an advisor for Rauf Denktash. And he also wrote a book called The Cyprus Puzzle, which is basically Turkish propaganda books. So because he's a nobody, and I've seen this happen a lot, there's a lot of Greek people, Cypriot people, English people who are nobodies, and then the Turks offer them under their wing, and they enjoy it, they like it, and they feel important, and then they embrace it and they carry on and they feel like they found their purpose. And I think this is basically the case with Michael Stephen. So we're going to go through it. Let's have a little watch. I don't think it's anything to worry about, like I said, but it's good to know. It's good to know because he says some awful, awful stuff. And this is some insight of the Turkish narrative, because Ersin Tatar is involved in this lobbying. And I think we need to be aware. I'm going to do an Ersin Tatar video next, because he speaks on this video. But it's good for us to be aware of the narrative that the Turks are trying to push, okay? So let's watch it and let's talk about it, and I'll interrupt through the video to interact a little bit.
When I started researching my book, I thought, as most English people did, that Turkey was the aggressor and that the Greek Cypriots were the injured party. But I soon realized that the exact opposite was the case.
What did he say? 14 seconds in and I'm having to pause it already. He said, when I started my first book, I thought, as many English people did, that Turkey was the aggressor and the Greek Cypriots were the injured party. This is what he said. But I soon realized that the exact opposite was the case. And in actual fact, you can't really say that either one of these two statements is true, what he thought in the beginning or what he came to suddenly realize. You can't even say that either of them are true, because there were aggressors on both sides and there were injured parties on both sides. But anyway, and there's proof of that as well, there's proof of that. But this is a video for another time. But yeah, let's move on and see what else he has to say.
In the British newspaper archives, I found many reports which had been forgotten, including this one, which I'm going to read, from 1963. We went tonight into the Turkish Cypriot quarter of Nicosia, in which 200 to 300 people had been slaughtered in the last 5 days. We were the first Western reporters there, and we have seen sights too frightful to be described in print. Horror so extreme that the people seemed stunned beyond tears. This was the deliberate, organized murder of men, women, and children. It was an attempted genocide, and there were further attempts in 1967 and 1974.
So is he talking about the violence which erupted before Christmas 1963? I mean, first of all, I've pointed out that there were 364 Turkish Cypriots who lost their lives and 174 Greek Cypriots who lost their lives that time, you know. And nobody really knows the events which led up to that Christmas, those events over Christmas. Nobody really knows. There's speculation, there's hearsay, but nobody knows the truth. But clearly there were victims on both sides, you know. And if you were to ask me who I feel did instigate this violence, then I would refer to a video which I've also got online on Cyprus Without Borders YouTube channel called Rauf Denktaş's Shocking Confessions. So I recommend you watch that, and then you'll understand why I am more inclined to believe that the Turks started the violence. Okay, let's move on.
These tragedies were born out of a deep religious and racial hatred of people just because they were Turkish.
What?
Which had been inculcated into many Greek Cypriot people over many years, not least by the Greek Orthodox Church.
What?
I fear that this has not entirely gone away, and until ever it does, it is futile to try to construct a federation or even a confederation.
Okay, so now he's telling us what he wants. He's starting to tell us what he wants. He doesn't want BBF or a unitary state. He wants two states. In other words, he wants recognition of the pseudo-state. So he mentioned that there's a deep religious and racial hatred of people just because they were Turkish. And I'm not going to deny that there are a minority of Greeks or Cypriots who do bear those kind of feelings. But it's not difficult to understand why when you look at the history. I mean, don't forget, we are descendants of the Byzantine Empire, and the Byzantine Empire used to stretch out across all of Anatolia, i.e. modern-day Turkey. And the Byzantines felt that they had found utopia through Christianity. And so hundreds of years later, when the Muslims came and changed all of that, you've got to understand as a Christian that we have had to deal with a lot of Muslim aggression. And in fact, it hasn't stopped recently at all. It hasn't stopped. You know, we still have, in 1974, during the invasion, young girls as young as 11 years old were raped, their fathers beheaded, and it was a brutal and barbaric invasion of Cyprus in 1974. And the condition of our churches, our places of worship in the occupied areas of Cyprus, and what they've done to them, and what they've done to the Cypriot and Greek culture overall, has been really quite appalling, really appalling. But anyway, let's move on.
The Turkish Cypriots are fortunate that the Greek Cypriots rejected the Annan plan. I was sure at the time, and so was President Denktaş, that the Greek Cypriots would have used their numerical and financial superiority and their undoubted legal and political skills to manipulate the institutions to their advantage and to the detriment of the Turkish Cypriots, as indeed they did from 1960 to 1963. They would by now have gained control of the whole island. That was a narrow escape, and the Turkish Cypriots should not walk into that trap again.
Okay, so first of all, the Turkish-speaking Cypriots, they weren't the lucky ones when we said no. They would have been the lucky ones if we had said yes. Because if we had said yes to the Annan plan, the Cyprus would have sacrificed its statutory European Union defence rights and surrendered them to Turkey. So effectively, we would have been under military control from Turkey if we'd accepted the Annan plan. So it was definitely right to say no to it. And also what he says about the 1960 to 1963 violence, or what he's talking about there, I'll ask you again to refer to my video, Rauf Denktaş's shocking confession. Let's move on.
The Greek Cypriots are still working towards the total control of the island, and I'm told that they even tried to prevent this webinar from happening. Now, whilst the perpetrators of genocide in the Second World War have been made to pay for their crimes, the leaders of the Greeks and Greek Cypriots have never to this day had to account for their behaviour to any court, nor even at the bar of public opinion. There's not even been an apology, just denials and attempts to shift the blame.
What genocide are you on about? This is just typically Turkish to always claim to be the victims of the atrocities they themselves have committed. And he mentions Nazi Germany and World War II. And I know many Germans. I've spent a long time in Germany. And I know that the Germans, they, like he says, they were made to pay for their crimes, but the Germans have admitted their crimes and they own their atrocities. They don't deny them, they acknowledge them, and they wear those atrocities, they wear them. And the world is still waiting for the Turks to acknowledge the genocide they committed against the Christians in World War I. Up to 4 million Christians murdered, slaughtered, And the Turks, like I said, they commit genocides themselves and then claim to be the victims of their own genocides. You can't make this stuff up.
Why were these Greek Cypriots never prosecuted? It is because the Americans and the British did not consider it in their own interests to encourage any action against them. Instead, the Greek Cypriots were treated as if they were the lawful government of all Cyprus, which they are not and never have been. For centuries, the island has been a strategic asset for important military powers, and those powers have never cared much about the wishes or needs of the people who live on the island, and so it is today. The rules of public international law say that the TRNC is entitled to recognition, but it has been withheld by everyone except Turkey, because the Americans, the British, and latterly the EU and the Russians, and of course Greece and the Greek Cypriots, do not want it, and they have the power to prevent almost everyone else from granting recognition. As to the Americans and the British, they effectively share a military base and an electronic listening station in Cyprus. But unfortunately for the Turkish Cypriots, these are in the Greek Cypriot part. They don't want any friction with the Greek Cypriots, so why would they care about the legal rights or even the human rights of the Turkish Cypriots if it would annoy the Greek Cypriots? Another factor for decision makers in London and Washington is the political influence of the Greek diaspora, which the Greek Cypriots have used far more effectively than the Turkish Cypriots have used the Turkish diaspora.
Okay, so here he's talking about the poor Turks and poor little Turkish-speaking Cypriots, and they have the whole world against them. And again, so playing victim, and the Turkish-speaking Cypriots have always been taught to play victim, and they've always been taught to live in fear of the Greeks. And by playing the isolated victim card, the Turkish-speaking Cypriots are far more inclined to look to Turkey for support.
As to the European Union, they have taken Greece and the Greek Cypriots in as members, and they will always take the side of a member against a non-member, particularly since members still have some veto powers. They have not admitted Turkey, and I don't think they ever will. They have cynically led Turkey to believe for 50 years that they might get in, but this has been done simply so that they could exert a degree of control over Turkey. However, I think that this policy is coming seriously unstuck, as it's driving Turkey towards the Russians and the Chinese and away from the West.
Choke on that water, you imbecile. Coming here with your threats.
As to the Russians, the Greek Cypriots have been cultivating them since Makarios's time, and they could always rely on Russian support at the UN. Even Turkey has not used its political assets to obtain recognition for the TRNC, though I hear that this may be changing. Why would Turkey want the TRNC to be an independent actor on the world stage if it can keep northern Cyprus in the state of near total dependence on Ankara, into which the Turkish Cypriots have been forced by international isolation? Why would Turkey want to risk being told by a recognized government of the TRNC to remove its troops from Cyprus, which it sees as essential to its own security?
And what about my security against the Turkish army?
We are all aware that some anti-Turkish sentiment exists in the TRNC, and of course it would be actively promoted from the south and from some embassies if the TRNC gained recognition. Finally, what do I think of the UN? Well, in the darkest days, the UN troops never had the will nor the ability to protect the Turkish Cypriots from atrocities, and nor do they today. Long ago, I advised President Denktash to send them away and stop the charade of the UN talks, as they were going nowhere. And the talks simply gave the Americans and the British an excuse to say that they are supportive, as they still say today, but to maintain the embargo until an overall settlement had been achieved. President Denktash agreed with me, but said that Ankara would not let him stop the talks. The talks are also preventing Denktash himself from devoting his time and energy to improving matters within the TRNC. I think the time has now come for the international community to take Cyprus off its agenda and allow the Turkish and Greek Cypriots to deal with each other as equals and with mutual recognition, if they so wish. Will the great powers allow that? Of course not. Do I think the 5+ UN talks will achieve anything? No, unless there has been a change of attitude on the part of those powers. I don't think a federation or even a confederation would work, because the differences are too deep for the foreseeable future. There would be nothing but trouble. In my view, the peoples of Cyprus will remain for the foreseeable future as pawns in the great game of geopolitics, where legal rules are respected only if they serve the interests of the powerful. We live in an imperfect world, but fortunately for the Turkish Cypriots, their country is a safe and pleasant place to live.
Okay, so he spoke about the UN there, and that's part of what I was saying earlier as well, by playing the isolated victim card, pushing that narrative that only Turkey can protect the Turkish-speaking Cypriots. Anyway, that's all he said during his initial opening 8 minutes, or however long it was he spoke for. But he did speak a little bit again, and this is what he said.
Well, as the professor said, and I said, there are no legal barriers. In fact, if you read the textbooks on recognition of states, you find that the TRNC does satisfy all the criteria. But as I said in my remarks...
So he's saying that... So what did he say? Legal... God, I'm tired of him now. Talking about some book of law which says it should be recognized and that everything is legal, blah, blah, blah. But it's not legal. And the reason that it's not legal is because it was taken by force. Anyway, Turkey have made several Geneva Convention violations. They've migrated Turkish settlers into the pseudo-state, into occupied Cyprus. That is a violation of the Geneva Convention. They haven't preserved our culture, which is also a violation of the Geneva Convention. And it can never be recognized because Cyprus was captured and taken by force That is what is illegal by international law, and that is the law, Mr. Stephen, okay?
The reason that the TRNC has not been recognized is because the great powers don't want it, for the reasons that that I indicated in the case of the British and the Americans, mainly to do with the military bases. If they were not there and the Greek Orthodox Church were not there, I think everyone would be living happily ever after in Cyprus.
What? What did he?
If they were not there and the Greek Orthodox Church were not there, I think everyone would be living happily ever after in Cyprus. Happily ever after in Cyprus. Happily ever after in Cyprus.
I can't believe he just said that. That was the bit which made me go to bed and not be able to sleep last night. The audacity of it is just, I mean, you can't make it up. This is the most disgusting thing I've ever heard anybody say about the Cyprus issue, that the Greek Orthodox Church should not be there. The Greek Orthodox Church, let me remind you, Mr. Stephen, we are descendants of the Byzantine Empire. Before that, we're descendants of the ancient Greeks. We have been living around these areas for thousands of years. And Christianity has been on the island of Cyprus since Christianity's inception. And now you turn around and you say that the Greek Orthodox Church should not be in Cyprus. Everybody would be happy if everybody would be living happily ever after. Is that right? Is that right? If the Greek Orthodox Church went there, you're disgusting. You are a disgusting man. And I don't even want to get angry about it. But I am angry. Of course I'm angry. How can you say such a thing? This island, which I live on, thousands of years ago, my ancestors used to swim in the waters in occupied Cyprus. I mean, how anybody can come to the conclusion that the Greek that the Greek Orthodox Church shouldn't be on this island when Christianity has been on this island since Christianity's inception. You're a washed up old man. I do hope you get to watch this video. This is my assessment of you. Because you're just a washed up old man who had a crap career and you could only find purpose in something as immoral and disgusting as what you are being affiliated with. But your opinion is worthless to me. It's worthless to most people. And this is why you are an advocate for something that is worthless. My opinion is more important than yours because I live on this island. And I plan to go back to the places where my dad and his parents were born and raised. And I intend to walk on those beaches and a free man, not having to show my ID, my passport, to go through to the occupied areas.